Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to discuss some strategies for when you're at home, especially during homework time. For our kids that struggle, homework is super stressful, so we need to come up with some strategies of what we can do ahead of time to make homework as seamless as possible. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some preparation before the homework. And the first thing we should always do is make sure that the child has a little bit of water, even if it's not too much, but they should always be drinking water. Water is, kind of starts up that electrical system in our body and in our brain. Some people, we like to call it brain juice. I personally try to drink my water in glass containers and not plastic. And so we're going to start out by just drinking a little bit of water. And by the way, I usually put a little bit of salt in my water. Our kids and adults, especially as adults, we're a little bit under-mineralized. If you get some really good Celtic sea salt, Himalayan salt, good sea salt, and not table salt, but and just put like a little quarter teaspoon per liter in your water, and even some electrolytes, that's has some added benefit. Okay, the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to kind of set up our energetic system. And so the first one is we have, if you haven't heard of Meridians, in acupuncture they use Meridians, and those are basically like rivers of energy that flow around our body. We have 12 of them. And each one, there's two sides to them. So for example, we have a heart meridian that runs down this way, and we have it also on this side, even though our heart is over here. It's bilateral. So what we're going to do is, a lot of our children are ungrounded, they're unsettled, they're not centered. Okay, so we're going to help that by placing one hand, so here's our navel, just place it under our navel, and the other hand with our fingertips on, or you can put your fingertips or just your hand, and then your fingertips on your chin. And this is one meridian. This is the center meridian. Okay, so you can actually, in some play in Touch for Health, they call it zipping up. So you can literally run your hand from down all the way to the top. That's called zipping up. Okay, or you can just simply hold the 2 points. And if you're really still, you may notice that your body, I started noticing this after a while, that your body will start to shift up a little bit. Okay, and we're going to do this. You do it until your body feels like it's finished, right? Maybe 20, 30 seconds. But then you can always switch hands. And the reason we do that is because our hands have opposite polarity. One is positive and one is negative. So we switch hands. So we're setting that center meridian. Now we're going to work on the governing meridian. The governing meridian actually starts from the tailbone and it goes all the way up to right above the mouth. And so I'm going to put one finger here, I'm going to put the other one here. This one's a little hard to do manually anyway. I mean, I do it sometimes, but it's a little bit harder. So it's just easier to just tell the kids, just put their hands back here and the other hand right here. And this one usually brings you back a little bit. Then after a little while you can switch. Okay, these two are particularly helpful when the kid is a little scattered. And a lot of our children are going to come home, especially from school, they're going to be super scattered. Now it would be good if during the day the teacher was using these throughout the day, but assuming they're not, we're going to at least try to get them kind of calmed down and ready to do our homework. And then the next one we're going to do is our K27 point. So one of the meridians is the kidney meridian, which actually starts at the bottom of the foot and runs up and right here. This is the end point. So here we have our collarbone, and if we come down, there's kind of like a sunk in area. We're going to hold that with like a C. We'll just hold it right there. Put the other hand below our belly button. And this one we can stimulate by kind of moving it around. It can be very tender sometimes, so anytime you have a point that's tender, kind of means that that area needs to be addressed, so you can even work on it a little bit longer, and then we can switch hands. And as you're doing this one is also really good for ocular lock, and it's good for kind of reorganizing the brain a little bit. So for our eyes, we can be tracking horizontally. So we can be doing this and moving our eyes from one side to the other. Now for children, this is going to be a little bit difficult because a lot of them will be moving their head with their eyes, but we want their eyes to be free of their head. So we want to try over time to get them just to be able to move their eyes. So that is a little bit tricky. And it might help if you had something horizontal that they can be looking at. Let's say like the top of a bookshelf that goes across their vision, or maybe if you're in a classroom, maybe the blackboard, or the whiteboard that goes the line. Anything that has or even the ceiling. Right now I'm looking at my wall and the ceiling, and because my wall is a different color than the ceiling, there's a definite line between the two. If they were the same color, they'd probably blend right into each other. Okay, and then we're going to try to stimulate both hemispheres by doing some cross crawling. Okay, what we want is we want one hand to be touching the other opposite knee. Now, some of our kids who are struggling because their brain is a little bit disorganized, and or their primitive reflexes are, maybe they're not at the right developmental movement phase. So what you might see a lot of kids doing this, or they're doing this, okay? And that's okay, because if they're at this stage, they still need to do it. They need to go through this stage. But you can just be modeling to do this. And you might just ask them, do you think you could try to do this? But don't force them, because mentally they might only be able to do this at the moment. Okay, so we're going to continue to do this. Now, if this becomes really easy, let's say your child is like 10 or 11 years old, and this starts to become really easy, then always throw a challenge in there. For example, they can put their feet to the back, and they can touch. Okay, they can touch the knee and then the foot. Kids really like to make this challenging. So anytime you put some challenge into it, first of all, the cerebellum is working, because anytime anything is automatic, the movement moves out of the cerebellum into a different part of the brainstem. Okay, or you can even do things like this. So you have a thumb and a pinky, and then switch, and then when that becomes easy, then they have to clap and switch, and that's where it becomes difficult for me because I don't do it very often. Or they can find their nose and their ear. So just to do something. So in the beginning, you can just start with cross crawls. And then we're going to end with something that's calming, which is hookups. So we're going to take our arms, put the thumbs down, we're going to cross and lace them and come up. Our legs we're going to cross. We're going to rest the tongue on the roof of our mouth. We're going to take a deep breath. So this is, we're going to take a deep breath, we're going to breathe in, hold it, and out. When your body or the child starts to feel like it's calming and their body is ready, the second part of this is to uncross your feet and to put your fingertips together. And then we're going to breathe in and down So what we just did in brain gym is called PACE, and which is the water, the K27 points, the cross crawl, and the hookups. When I'm doing that, I also like to add in these other points, which in brain gym is the earth buttons and the space buttons. Okay, these are again based on meridians and from acupuncture, so they come from different fields. But anytime anybody in the house is upset, I would advise you to go straight into hookups. And let's say your child is too wound up to even want to do hookups, so everybody else should be in hookups, and then as the environment calms down, then there is an effect when the child will start to calm down. Otherwise, if you can teach the child to get into hookups ahead of time and say, now, if you feel like you're getting, if you're starting to get upset, and then I'm going to say hookups, and then you're going to get into hookups, and if they're pre-warned a lot of times, that will help and they can do that. Okay? All right, another thing that we can do to prepare us for our work, and kids really like this one. This is skull tapping, so we have different pressure points all over our body, but on our skull we have points from nearly all of our meridians. So we are going to just start with the temples. We just have an easy pattern to remember, so we start at the temples. You can use 2 fingers or all 4 fingers, but make sure it's, it doesn't have to be too light. So make sure they're kind of tapping, but they're not pounding on themselves. But kids like to pound on themselves anyway. So they're going to climb up to their forehead and go back to their temples, and then up to their forehead. Now up to the top of the head, back to the forehead, and back to the temples. We're always going to come back to the temples. Now we're going to go under the eyes, and now under the nose, back to the temples, and now down to the chin. And this time we are going to go around our ear. That's where our vestibular system is. Then we're going to come back. And we're going to end it with our thinking caps. And our thinking caps is basically we're unrolling our ears from the top to the bottom 3 times. So by the time you're done, they should be a little bit warm. And I like this because there's so many points on your ear, but it activates not only your listening, but just right around your lobe. It's connected to a lot of parts of your brain, even if you wanted to get in there a little bit. Okay, so here's your thinking caps. All right, so that is, skull tapping is a really great way to start being ready for reading or thinking or concentrating or having to study. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about what to do and how to prepare our child for homework time. So the first thing that you need is a schedule. So the child should be coming home probably the same time every day if they ride the bus or if you pick them up, unless you have to take them somewhere directly from school. But usually if they ride the bus, they come home at a certain time. So you kind of need to lay out a schedule, because maybe every day is going to be a little bit different if you have to take them to soccer or swimming or something on one of the days. So you need to carve out write in a schedule, and if it looks different every day, then have a weekly schedule where it's when they come in, they shouldn't have to go straight to homework when they come home from school, because they're probably unpacking the day, okay, and they might be very exasperated. So they need some rest time, they need time for water to remineralize, they need some protein. Okay, protein is going to be really important to maintain that blood sugar so they're not fluctuating with their emotions. So you need to pick a time that's good, a time that's not chaotic, whether it's, it might be, some parents it's convenient where the mom is cooking and the kid does their homework on the counter so the mom can kind of check. But usually it's going to be good that the child has his own space. So we're organizing the time, so pick a time and a schedule, so there's a routine, because a lot of these kids need a routine, but also pick a space, and the space needs to be like his homework space or hers, and with a clear, organized desk. So it could have some things on there that they're going to need, but it needs to be organized, so when they bring their stuff there, it's not overwhelming. It's just a nice, clear table, and and he's going to have his pencils, he's going to know where his pencil sharpeners and his erasers and everything, because that becomes a problem. And then once it's time for homework, do the prep routine. So that was all the exercises that we have discussed. And then when it's actually time for the homework, one of the things that we find is that children who struggle, they get overwhelmed when they see like all their homework. So we need to help them chunk their homework. So let's say they have 3 assignments. So first of all, they have 1 assignment. And let's say the 1 assignment has too many, like 10 questions on it, and like it's science, and they have 10 questions on it, and that's too many words. So when they look at it, they just get overwhelmed and they can't see the question. So what we need to do is we need to come up with a good way is to put it in a folder where you can, either if you can physically cut it up, or if, let's say, or if you scan it and copy it, and you can cut it up so you're not cutting up the original, paper. Or you put it in a folder where you're just pulling it out one by one so the kid can just focus on the one question. It becomes a lot less intimidating. Another thing too is chunking the time. So if you have a timer, you need to say, okay, you have in 10 minutes you're going to be finished with this one, or 5 minutes, or whatever the time is. Set the timer, because a lot of times if they have one task with one amount of time, then they're able to accomplish that. They go, okay, I just have to do this one thing until the timer rings. When the timer rings, then they could either have a break, they could go on to the next one, just depends on your child. But maybe every question they need to get up, run around, do some movements, eat a little snack, or eat, let's say you have the snack out, and say every time you finish you can, let's say you cut up a piece of apple, every time you finish you can come and have 1 slice of apple. So somehow you need to, might need to split up and chunk up the time. Okay, so as far as brain breaks during the homework time, so some good brain breaks are foods, so fat and protein. Fat is really good. You need good fat, so not all fats are good. So if you have good fat, fat is good because, especially if you're eating with an apple. So an apple with almond butter or peanut butter is good because the sugar that's in the apple, the fat will help kind of help maintain that level, that glucose level, instead of having any spikes. Because some of our kids who are really fast, like go kids, and they're hard to stop, they actually process their fruit too fast. So actually having a lot of fructose isn't probably very good for them, for those kids. But if you embed it with fat and protein, then it helps stabilize that. Also, having the kids periodically go run around the house, run around the block. Have them run. If they're a little bit older, have them run a mile before they go to school or before they get on the school bus. That will actually help them settle down. But when they get home, have them do some running or other kind of heavy work. So any kind of heavy work, lifting boxes, even if it's just for the sake of it, take a box, walk around the house, take it, lift it here, put it down there, whatever you have to do. I know in a school, sometimes there's agreements between teachers where one kid will lift a heavy, take a box of books and take it to another class. So if the kid just comes in with this box of books, the other teacher knows that that kid needed a little bit of a heavy work break. Also, if they're getting a little frustrated, they can stop and do some of the energetic exercises to kind of restabilize them. They can do their hookups, or they can do any of those exercises that we discussed that help prepare the brain for learning. And have them, they can do something fun too in the middle. So let's say they finish their math, and before they go on to the writing, Have them just, it can be with crayons, pencils, markers, or just invisible, just with their fingers, but have them draw with two hands. They love that, okay? They really do. And you're going to find that some of the kids have like no sense of their non-dominant hand, so just have them, it can be scribbles, it can be letters, it can be whatever they want to be. It can be in the, with chalk, so it can be big, large movements, or it can be crayons, or it can be, they can lay down and do it with their feet as well. So all that two-handed movement helps get cooperation between the two hemispheres. So I hope that these suggestions were very helpful for you to think about, okay, what do we need to do to help make homework time a little bit more productive, a little bit more successful, and not so chaotic and stressful in the whole family, because I know that having a lot of homework is not stressful just for the child, it becomes a stressor for the entire family, and we need to figure out how to relieve that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about right now how important it is to communicate with the schools and the teacher. If the child is in elementary school, more than likely you're going to be able to negotiate a little bit with the teacher. Most teachers are out for student success. They probably are seeing the same things that you're seeing at home. Sometimes the kid really tries to hold it together in school, and the teacher doesn't realize that once the child gets home, that they just go out of control and becomes a little demon, okay, at homework time, because literally they're trying all day to hold it together. So the teacher might think, well, no, he's really quiet and he doesn't get much done, but he's really quiet, or he tries really hard. So you do need to communicate, because the teacher and the parent might be seeing two different types of children. So let them know that, it's only appropriate for this kid to have so many minutes of homework, or this type, or for example, let's say he's really good with hands-on physical, maybe he needs to do a different type of a project if writing is such a struggle, because if trying to get him to write is going to cause tears, well, that's going to shut down their brain. They're going to have very low oxygen flow from the frontal cortex. They're cutting off the thinking part of the brain, so it's going to be very unproductive. So thinking about, well, how else can this child show me that he understands the material? So maybe he can dictate. If the assignment is creative writing, then maybe they're really good storytellers with their mouth, but they just can't get it on paper. So have them dictated to you where you can write it, or into a recording device. I was going to say a cassette player, but I don't think anybody owns that anymore, but into your iPod, and maybe once the story has come out, maybe then they can listen and then they can write, so they're not thinking about their thoughts and thinking about writing at the same time. Also, again, getting permission to cut up those homework papers or copy and then cut them up into smaller chunks, but making the teacher aware that you need to do that. Any other kind of projects that the child might be more prone to be able to do. So my son, I know he had to do some things for algebra, and luckily the teacher gave him they gave the kids choices, so by the end of the unit they had to choose different things, and he always chose to make the video to explain the concept. So I was in the classroom at the time. I had a smart board, so I had him, he was able to videotape himself showing and giving the example of the homework. So, having them just thinking about what are their strengths and what are other ways that they can show that they understand the concept, besides having to keep doing it in the way that they're struggling. Okay, and another thing is you as a parent have the right to request testing. So anytime you are really you really see a lot of struggles, and let's say the teacher's kind of, they're not really saying anything, as a parent you have the right to say, you know what, I know that my kid is struggling, and you can request them to be tested, and then there's a federal timeline that they have to be tested within a certain amount of days. So if you think that that is a road that you might want to go down, maybe for an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, or a 504 plan, which is just a, so the IEP, which the individualized education plan, that plan is for children who really qualify for special education services. Maybe they'll see a resource teacher, maybe they get some maybe speech or whatever, they get specific services. A 504 plan, the child doesn't get services, but maybe they have ADHD, a diagnosis, or they have some other kind of diagnosis, and it's impeding them from being successful, so they can make accommodations. So 504 plan is for accommodations such as less test questions, or extended testing time, or being able to do their homework. So if the teacher's a little bit inflexible about the variety of ways that they can present their knowledge, then if you kind of try to pursue a 504, the teacher is bound to say, okay, we discussed that these are going to be the strategies, and then they have to abide by that. And that carries with them through middle school, through high school, and even through college. So there are college students who do need extra time on test or different kind of supports, and that they can get that based on their IEP, if they still qualify by then, if they still need it. All right, so I hope that these strategies were helpful and gave you some thought, and if you have any additional questions, you can always contact me. But I would also say, please go contact your school, your administrator, and your teacher, and sit down and see and brainstorm, because they also have a lot of other strategies, because they work with a lot of students who struggle as well. All right? Thank you.